Awesome. Here we are. Here we are. First episode of the Early Stage Founders podcast. Really, really exciting. And we have here Zachary Cox. It's been an absolute killer in the community and a pretty cool guy that I met just maybe a couple months ago.
Yeah, probably like 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, not too long at all. But working on some really sick projects too. And I'm really excited to dive into that and how you got here and what you're excited for in the future. But if you wouldn't mind just telling the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, man.
Yeah. Well, first off, Avery, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed working with you the last few weeks and pumped to be here today.
Awesome,
So
dude.
a bit about me. I've been in the FinTech space for coming up on 8 years. So really focused on like technology that automates or streamlines finance and accounting processes. So I was in a company in mortgage right out of school, did a bunch of work to like stand up more mature systems for them, and I have stayed in that space really going on 8 years. A couple of B2C projects, but mostly do B2B work. And my most recent endeavor is a centralized platform for companies to automate their entire invoicing process. And that's been going for a couple of months and got some big things planned for the future on that one.
Awesome. Yeah, dude. Slipstream. Yeah, we've been hearing all about that recently. And your sort of arc with it's had a pretty quick takeoff, at least from sort of concept to having a steady flow of people coming in and getting a steady flow of work going, getting integrations going with HubSpot and stuff like that. Like doing some pretty serious work, right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the idea came from a client project that I was doing, kind of freelance, and they had a specific need for going from HubSpot to QuickBooks. Nothing that existed was meeting that need. And I had to build something different for them than what the product is today. But it just helped me identify that need. So I asked them, if it was going to bother them in any way if I took that to market, and they said, no, go do your thing. So that's what I did, built out a super simple beta. And over the last couple months, we filled that up. And Avery, since you and I have been working together, have been in process of doing like the first general release of the platform, and really like redoing branding and redoing the website and making everything about the project a little more official now that we've validated the idea and get ready for the next stage for the company.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. So as far as the wait list goes, like how did you go about building that wait list?
So we actually didn't really do a wait list. So when I built the first version, I just really simple landing page, like one page website, published it and actually just ran some ads to it. And that was how we
Sweet.
got the first couple customers. Was like super targeted Facebook ads. So we knew the exact ICP of who we wanted to hit, and we got super narrow. So there were only like 7,000 people that could even be targeted to in the ad campaign. So got a few folks from that. And then the price of ads started to get pretty expensive. I know we've touched on this before. I think with the election cycle, there's a lot more aggressive buying of, huge chunks of ad space. So paused ads and switched to some cold outreach methods, and got the last few folks from cold outreach. And then going forward, we'll do a hybrid approach of different methods and continue to bring on new channels as we, drill down each one and can kind of automate that.
That's awesome, dude. Okay, cool. So you started out with Facebook ads. That's really interesting. Because I know it's a little bit more of like it can be a higher risk, higher reward because you can scale it up really fast if you have the budget and stuff like that. But like the most important part is the targeting. So it's cool to hear that, you narrowed it down to 7,000 people out of the hundreds of millions on Facebook and then you were able to just deliver, I'm assuming really, really good creative and really good ad copy to them, and got them to a landing page and converted them from there.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think the ad creative was that good.
Okay, interesting.
Um, but it's a very targeted solution to a very targeted problem. And so I think that was the big um, differentiator, is just a very narrow net in a very small pond, but you know what
And
you're
just
fishing for.
sure, and just so the relevance, basically, like you were just delivering something super relevant to who was seeing the ad.
Yeah, so we did some carousel ads and we would highlight one word in each carousel. But it's like a word that would stand out that would hook someone in this target group. So it's enough to get them to pause. And if they read the first carousel, they've validated themselves whether or not they fall into that category. Like whether or not this product can help them, they know first slide. So if they, skim through the rest of the slides, the likelihood that they'll at least go to the website is pretty high. And then from there, we've talked about my website does not convert particularly well, but if you have a high converting website and you get ads where people can pre-qualify themselves almost instantly, I do think that's a pretty effective funnel.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So that's really interesting, dude, because one thing I know we've both been working on outreach a lot too, and the relevance was just the number one thing to draw their attention. We'll hook them, of course, and draw the attention, but even throughout the funnel down to the conversion, if it was just hyper relevant, it was allowing us to be way more direct with people and shorten the funnel a little bit. Versus what traditionally kind of works, which is maybe starting a conversation, asking questions, and going from there. We were able to sort of like spearfish people almost with, outbound on LinkedIn. And I know that's sort of an emerging strategy for you. How's that going so far?
It's going really well, really well. And I actually got a couple of new follow-ups this morning already
That's awesome.
from some stuff, late in the week last week. And to your point, I think part of the reason that it works so well, if you can really narrow down your ICP and ask a targeted, relevant question in the beginning, I think part of the reason that's so successful is it shows that you know what you're talking about. Whereas like there are so many people everyone's probably getting hit with, hundreds of messages a day, of just like, and that's email, text, cold DMs, miscellaneous notifications on your phone. Like, so an easy way to stand out is just to ask a question that is super direct for that person. And they know like, okay, this person, they know what they're talking about. They're not just wasting my time, spinning my wheels. So that's at least what I've seen the last few weeks, and going to continue to press that until it's no longer, until it stops working.
Yeah, 100%, dude. Yeah, same here. I mean, I've been using like LinkedIn specifically for outreach for like 2 years, a little bit over 2 years now. And it's an awesome, awesome channel. And anything that allows you to like pull a really, really targeted list using, Sales Nav or something like that. And of course, we can even get into like I think, where did you get that one list? Was it Apollo?
No, it was like some miscellaneous company
Gotcha.
online. So I was looking for like companies that use certain tech stacks. Um, and this company said they could pull a lead list for me that met all of my criteria. And they promised to have more advanced criteria than Sales Navigator, but
Mm,
that was not the case. And the leads were garbage. So to date, I haven't gotten a single response out of that lead list.
yeah.
Um, you live and you learn. That was the first time I really bought leads. So I just didn't know any better.
For sure. No, I've done the same thing. I've even used, some of the more well-known platforms, and I think they work pretty well for like email or something like that. But I remember the same thing. Just like the connection rate was really, really low. Like they just weren't active on LinkedIn. And that's something that I think SalesNav kind of filters that out a little bit. I don't think it's something that they make clear, but like our SalesNav lists have done really, really well. Like it pulls people that are active on LinkedIn. You get great responses, great connection rates and stuff like that. And as long as you can pull that really, really targeted list, right, and then hit them with that direct, super relevant copy, it's an incredible channel. And when you automate it up to, 40 requests a day or 50 messages a day or something like that, it can actually be an insanely high volume channel too when you dial it in. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. So last week, I tested a couple of tools to streamline some things. This week, I'm actually going to dial that back and do more by hand and see if I can get even more targeted. But to your point, one of my favorite things about SalesNav is you can toggle a have they posted on LinkedIn like flag, and that filters out a ton of folks who maybe like made a profile but they never get on it. And then they'll tell you, like 2 recent posts on LinkedIn, something like that. So
That is
um,
awesome.
it's a really good way to tell, maybe they're not on it every day, but they've been on it in the last week or two. So they're going to see this, in a week or 2 weeks. Um, I will also say, I have found the response cycle is longer on LinkedIn than something like Twitter. But I think that's probably a good thing. There are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on Twitter, but they're not like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're your ideal customer just because they're active and easier to get in touch with, like through a different channel. Um,
Right.
and at least for me, going B2B, I've found that LinkedIn, you get maybe more serious prospects. Um,
For sure. For sure. And what's cool about that, because I've experimented with outreach on Twitter, outreach on other social media platforms and stuff like that, other than the targeting, because of course people have like their job title and stuff like that. You can get amazing targeting and that really helps you out with the automation. But also the fact that it's almost built for outreach. Like a lot of your DMs on Twitter or Instagram or something like that, they sort of err on the side of sending you to spam, I think, until, you can dial it in to where maybe it's not going to spam and stuff like that. And that means taking a more indirect approach, having a longer conversation, asking something more neutral, and setting aside much more time to flesh out these conversations and steer them in the direction of like any sort of conversion. But, with LinkedIn, they don't have, to my knowledge at least, there's not like a regular messages and then a spam part. So most of your messages all the time just sort of hit their inbox, pop up even on their page if they're in their feed. And it's really, really easy to sort of get that message in front of them. And then it gets into, if you have that really relevant message that catches their eye and they want to reply to it, it's an awesome channel for outreach.
yeah, I agree. I spent a lot more time on Twitter than LinkedIn over the last couple of years because I just like the platform more. But again, that's a personal preference. That doesn't mean it's a better place to get customers. Um, and in my experience, like Twitter is like a smoky bar and LinkedIn is like a corporate office setting. And
Right.
so, you know, I use that paradigm like filter to determine where I want to make my first touch. Like if I was selling something that you could start a conversation with someone about in a smoky bar, then Twitter's a great place to go. But if it's you need more of a corporate setting the first time you approach them, LinkedIn is where to be.
Dude, that's a pretty interesting metaphor right there. And it does make sense. It's like way more casual versus way more professional. And I mean, it seems like that even the content, right, of LinkedIn is sort of geared to that professional, setting. There might be memes and stuff like, have the SEM Rush and stuff like that post all these great memes, and they're funny, but they're all professional and they have to do with like building businesses and stuff like that, or search traffic or whatever the case may be. And then X, you have sort of your funny content also. That's even something I kind of factored into my strategy of like provide value, and then say something totally off the cuff and like weird and random. And both do well, and I think people appreciate the change of pace too on something like X.
Yeah, I think so. I think in some ways you can be more authentic there, because you don't have to be so buttoned up. Um, and so it's just different strategies for, how you would grow on each one. Um, I've actually made some really great connections, outside of like prospecting, like trying to find business on Twitter, and then like have connected with them on LinkedIn. So you get
Interesting.
them in both, but then like LinkedIn is more of that professional networking, like sales opportunity platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're both awesome, man. As far as like social media goes, since we're on the topic, is any kind of personal brand in the cards for you? Is that something you're working on?
Um, a little bit, but it's kind of a secondary thing to Slipstream. So like I have a YouTube channel, have done a couple of podcasts, and I'll post one of those like once a week, once every other week. But that's partially to like supplement some of the content that I might give to YouTube for products that I build. Um, so that I'm not posting, once a week. I can post a handful of times a week, kind of supplementing that with personal brand content. But really outside of YouTube, not a ton right now. I do think it's valuable, and down the road would like to invest in a little bit more of that, but it's almost a full-time job if you want to post content across YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. The list goes on. Um, so not immediate plans is the short answer to that.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, I understand what you mean about it's almost a full-time job posting across all these platforms. Like it's something that has become like a big channel for me at this point with, with early stage founders and stuff like that. It really is like a part of our funnel to like have all of that reach and show up on all these platforms. So, and traditionally, like it's crazy that I'm even on like doing podcast stuff, or I was on your podcast. It's crazy that I was doing Twitter, anything like that. Like my personal Instagram, even now to this day, I haven't posted on it since 2021.
Yeah.
Like I was not like a social media person at all, very like private, very in the background kind of guy. And then it came along with this that, we have so many, potential members or audience members and stuff that are out there, right? And it just makes sense for us to be creating content. And it sort of became a big push for me outside of my comfort zone to like, hey, I kind of have to start making content. I have to show my face, elsewhere and in public and stuff like that. But it is extremely demanding, dude.
Yeah.
It's all the time. And you're creating different content, right? You're creating X threads, you're creating newsletter, long form writing, videos like this, etc. It's crazy, dude.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I I think a lot of the time comes from tailoring the content to each platform. As we were saying about LinkedIn and X being so different, even the written content, you might have to change it across both. Video might have to edit 3 or 4 different versions. So it's time consuming, but it is, I do think, one of the best channels depending on your business, because you get so much leverage out of the algorithms, um, that you wouldn't get in other channels.
For sure. And it's almost like a must at some point in the roadmap. You know what I mean? Like because outreach is awesome, but it's also limited, unless you plan to hire out an entire sales team or SDR team or something like that with 10 people who are all reaching out all day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's especially for like a solo business or something like that. You kind of have like a ceiling with outreach. Um, Ads are awesome too, but with ads, right, like you're trading money directly for that conversion and stuff like that. And then you have social media where, in time, you'll be reaching thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of potential customers with you know, a single product, a single thing that you made, recorded, wrote out, whatever the case may be. And you have that opportunity to deliver your messaging just like you would in outreach or paid ads. But it's organic too, which is really, really cool. So, and, in today's landscape or whatever, like it is kind of almost mandatory at some point, right? That's where everybody's attention is. So people are opening up their phones and scrolling through these apps and stuff like that. That's where you reach your people.
Yeah. And to, I think at the core of all of this is just, you have to go wherever your customers are, and be in
100%.
as many of those places as you can afford to be, across time and money. You know, and that I think changes as the business grows, or you get into different product lines, things like that. But it's at the core of every strategic decision about like, how do I want to spend my marketing time, is just, where's everybody? Where can I reach the most of them with this input of time?
100%, dude. That's spot on. But dude, will you take us back real quick, switch gears a little bit to like, how did you get here, man? You said you worked in FinTech for 8 years. Now you're, building your own businesses and stuff like that. Like, how did this start out for you?
Yeah. So going all the way back in 2019, I was still at the first company I went to after school. And I was a controller there, doing like, it's basically a manager position for accounting and finance. So I was doing a bunch of things like invoicing, processing all their bills, preparing financial reports for the CFO. And the CEO wanted to change the pricing model of the business. But in order to do that, the how much data we'd have to process to send invoicing, it would take like hundreds of hours a month. And it was just me on the team. So I talked to our like director of technology and a buddy of mine on the sales team who was learning to code. And I was like, can you show me just some resources where I can go learn to code? I think we're going to have to automate our invoicing process. And so fast forward about 3 months, and we were automating portions of this process. And then over the next like year or so, just continued to flesh it out and iterate, a handful of versions of it, until pretty much the entire workflow was automated. So I stayed there for a while. And then I left at the beginning of 2022, I think. Yeah, 2022. And started a B2C fintech company. So this was kind of the tail end of like the Robinhood craze. And I'd studied finance in college, was always really interested in that, and had a bunch of contacts at various investment firms. So put together like a small advisory committee, and started building analytics tools for retail traders. The idea being it's like real easy to use, but more robust than what you get in like Robinhood. So did that for about a year, ultimately shut it down. That's a pretty competitive space, and B2C is not a great business model if you're selling something super cheap. So closed that down. I went and worked at a big company, publicly traded, adminning their accounting systems. So optimizing their systems, trying to find things that we could improve in the process. And then started doing some kind of freelance projects to help businesses automate their invoicing. So kind of going back to my roots where I learned to code, and automating some of these tasks. And then Flash forward to this year, and I wanted to build just a centralized platform where all of these invoice automation tools can live. And by doing it that way, I can offer it at a more competitive price point to customers. They basically get the best of both worlds of like a consulting business and a standardized SaaS. So everything's like white glove service. We do all the work for them, but they can make use of some of our standard components to cut down on like development times. So, so that's the birth of Slipstream, and have really been focused on that this year. A couple of freelance projects as well. But this is my core focus at the moment.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. So that's interesting how the SaaS came out of your like basically freelancing, right? And then you mentioned that you built that automation for a client, saw that it could be served to many other people, and then turned that into a SaaS, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, the consulting side is great because people will tell you what problems they have. So if you can find a way to solve those problems, not just for them, but also at a wider scale, you know, you're getting introduced to validated ideas already. You know, it's like they aren't the only person that has this problem. There might be some specifics that they have for that problem, but the general problem itself, like there are going to be others that need this as well.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So like I used to do growth marketing and conversion rate of, consulting as well. I still do it to some degree. And now that you mention it, I never really thought about it that way, but you do learn so much about their problems and challenges and even like daily workflows and things like that. And there's sort of that wealth of opportunity if you really wanted to look to make these maybe, micro projects and stuff to speed something up or to solve, a really specific niche problem. Never thought about it that way, but there's so many people that are freelancing right now that want to, maybe build something a little bit bigger and something beyond the scope of just their own work. That's a really, really good tip for them to start looking for those opportunities with their existing clients.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like if you have a general area of expertise, so like yours is marketing, mine is more on like the operation side. Like if you go door to door, to every business in your area, even if you can just sit down with 5 of them, and have a conversation, you'll start to see trends emerge across some of these businesses. Like we have pain points in this area of our marketing. We have these pain points in our areas of sales. So it's like anyone can do it on a local level, just start to find people that have issues that you can help solve. And then eventually you'll start to see, okay, I could build this and market it to others. And that's a good way to do it like real cheap, so like we ran paid ads for Slipstream, but I just set aside a small budget from freelancing, kind of knowing that we may or may not get this money back. If it's a bad idea, then it is what it is. If you don't want to do that though, if you don't want to potentially burn the money, start local. Anyone can go door to door and talk to a bunch of folks in their community.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great tip, dude. And even like for somebody that's offering something sort of internet based or whatever, and maybe it's hard to sort of like find people locally or anything. Like the idea of starting locally, starting with like a couple handful of people that for a fact fit the bill of, what you're trying to sell and stuff. That's the name of the game, dude. Like I think so many people see, big marketing funnels and stuff like that where, I need to start driving all this traffic and then convert them through the website and stuff like that. That will come at some point eventually, right? But if you just have a new project or a wait list or your very first paid offer for this business, right? You have to just go out and have those conversations with a handful of people first. You're going to learn way more about the actual challenges and pain points you're trying to solve, hesitations with your offer, the whole 9 yards, dude. Having those conversations face to face with maybe your first 10, 20, 30 people is essential, dude.
Yeah, I agree. And you also you get an extra layer of feedback by being in person with somebody. Like their facial expressions, their body language might tell you things that they're not saying with their words, and you wouldn't get that, through the internet. Um, but one of the questions I have for you, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit the last few weeks. You mentioned some of these things will come down the road. So you kind of have to run two tracks. It's like, what do I have to do to grow my business right now? And what are the things I need to be investing in for long-term growth? SEO being a good one, or some of the social media strategies being another, of like, we have to invest in this knowing that it might take 6 months to a year to really reap the benefits. So how do you find where you divide that time? Like, how much do you allocate to each?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think prioritizing it is the most important of all, right? And the way I sort of look at it is, number one, where are these people right now and where can I get in front of them? So if that's in person, if that's through LinkedIn outreach, if they spend a lot of time on Instagram or something like that, YouTube, whatever the case may be, if there's Google searches, if you can sort of prioritize it by fastest results right now, and then sort of the greatest volume of results later on. So if you could look and all those channels that I just mentioned, it's easier to reach out on LinkedIn than Instagram. So okay, let's start there. In person, I can always do that as well. So maybe I'm going in person and maybe I'm reaching out on LinkedIn, trying to book a call or something like that. And say that there's a lot of searches as well on YouTube, but not so many on Google. Like, okay, SEO is going to be important no matter what. Even if people are just searching for our brand name or something like that, we want to be able to pop up for that. But I think we should prioritize YouTube. So if you started getting into YouTube videos and stuff like that, and you set aside maybe 2 hours a week to create a YouTube video a week, start posting that with the understanding that it's going to take months to see any results. But to supplement that, you're doing the in-person and you're doing the LinkedIn outreach for immediate results. That's a pretty good game plan, and then as you sort of start to develop that, the in-person and the LinkedIn will start to get you some revenue for this new project. YouTube at some point is going to start picking up. You're going to start getting inbounds to your website. Maybe at that point, okay, let's start creating articles too. We'll set aside some time for that. And we'll take all this content that we're already making and maybe just at first repurpose that for Instagram or Twitter or something like that. And you start to expand that way. But 100% focus on what's going to drive results right this second, today, and then start building things in the background for the long haul.
I love it. So you think maybe like a 75-25 split in terms of time, like 75% immediate results, 25%, future investment?
100%, 100%. I could even use this as an example. Like I run outreach for early stage founders for new memberships and stuff like that. And that's my number one strategy. I've been doing it for a few months now, ever since this community has been alive, right? And that's what I can count on to drive new memberships today. So just like you're saying, 75% of my time is going into getting those new memberships right now, but I'm setting aside the time to start to develop this podcast as well. And I know for a fact it's not going to produce results for a while. You know what I mean? But I'm starting it now, and I know that eventually it's going to contribute to our inbound. Similarly, SEO, I've created some articles and stuff like that for certain keywords, but I know that our authority score at the time of this recording is 2. So it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the vast majority of my time is going into what's going to get new members in the community right now. And that's outreach for us.
Love it, man. Yeah, I think, well, I'll say this, after joining early stage founders and reading through some of the um, tutorials that you have, it's completely changed how we're thinking about strategy, specifically like SEO. And and maybe YouTube. So we're in a similar boat of like, we know those two aren't going to produce results for a while, but outside of the things that will produce results today, those are probably the two best long-term investments.
For sure. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you're doing the same thing, right? Like it's cool to see, like you started YouTube before I did, of course, and like you're doing well with that, and that's in the background, and you're consistent with it, and you already have sort of the time invested up front. So you were doing the ads, those were driving results. You were doing the LinkedIn, that was driving results. But now that you've added YouTube and SEO to your arsenal, like, maybe Q1, Q2, that's going to start opening up another channel for you that you record a session right now, or you write an article once, and then months down the line, it's still producing results for you.
yeah,
So it's awesome, man. I think it's the case with anything like this. I wish I started a long time ago,
yeah.
so it's cool that you already have the legwork done.
Well, to circle back to your, earlier question about personal branding is like, that's part of the reason that I am making that investment. Like, it's not so much that I wanted to, but and X is probably the best example of this, but you see some of these guys who like built a personal brand on X, and if they put out like a B2C tool or even like B2B for some of these creators, um, they'll make $10,000-$20,000 the first week that they drop a new product, just because their audience is so big.
Yeah.
So it's like, holy shit, it's crazy to see, but it just shows you how much value there is in investing that time. So the second
100%.
best time to start is today.
Exactly. And I think that's amazing advice for the audience. Like, no matter what you're getting into, having an audience that you can reach immediately and organically is invaluable. We're looking at some of these other early growth strategies like LinkedIn, and you're spending a lot of effort to connect with one person at a time, or you're spending a lot of money on ads to connect with a bunch of people at one time. Having your own personal brand audience is the only way to connect with that same volume of people pretty much for free, right? Of course, things go into it, but when you drop a tweet saying, hey, I'm releasing this product, here's a wait list, and you have, 1,000 people sign up to it or whatever, that didn't cost you any money.
Yep, exactly. And also some of the more like visually appealing products, like tangible products, do so well on Instagram and TikTok. So
For sure.
we used to work with this guy in college. I worked at a bar, and our manager started this company where he does those like epoxy tables, with like old wood and like epoxy fillings.
Yeah.
But he films everything that he does, and they just drive crazy numbers on Instagram and TikTok. And that's where all of his sales come from. People see the
Dude.
video of him making these custom tables. They go, hey, can I buy this table from you? And they're high end, it's like a $4,000 table. So he's doing like really high ticket stuff all through like Instagram and TikTok shop, basically.
That's so smart. That's so smart. And
It's
he's really
brilliant.
just recording the work he's already doing. It's not like some whole additional time thing that he has to set aside. He can just record his own work that he would be doing anyway. And that becomes like his, kind of customer acquisition channel. That's amazing, dude.
100%, man. I think, and I don't know this for sure, but my guess is he just bought like 3 different iPhones and like stands, put them up around his studio. So like one's on a time lapse, one's standard from a different angle, etc. And then he just clips it all together and posts it. That's his entire sales strategy. So outside of doing the work, he doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. I mean, that's the dream, right? To just record you sitting at a computer doing what you're doing anyway, and have, people resonate with that and want to, become a customer. That's incredible, bro.
Yeah. So I think, again, I do think for some of the physical products, it definitely works better, but It's whatever I do next, and it will be a while, I think, but I'm going to try and do something that's more physical products for that reason alone. The content almost makes itself.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. So when I was, doing consulting really, really heavy, we worked with a few e-commerce brands as well. And I was so pulled to like, what really pulled me to it was sort of the customer lifetime value of it. Of like, if you can create this audience that loves your products and even something that's not perishable or whatever, you're selling shoes or you're selling some sort of clothing or something like that, but you have these collections that like every quarter come out and you can count on a base of users to always come back and buy these collections. It was a really, really cool kind of business model that I was interested in from like a marketing perspective. The thing that threw me off about it is of course the like production side and the inventory side,
Yeah.
right? Because I know you as well as like a SaaS guy and a developer. It's so appealing to make a product one time and then serve all of your customers, push an update for all customers, and not be worrying about like producing, putting the money up front, producing 1,000 of this, and then trying to sell it and hoping that you sell them all, hoping that the margins are pretty good, and so on and so forth. But it is interesting, dude. E-commerce obviously is massive, and it works really well for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, drop shipping was really big, but I don't think it ever quite worked for those merch drops because the customer experience is so bad. Like if you
Right,
buy a shirt, you don't want to wait 3 weeks to get the shirt. Um,
right.
so I, you know, especially with merch, I think there is a lot of risk up front of like how much inventory do we buy. Um, I guess it's probably better to sell out, but then you're kicking yourself of like, oh, we could have sold 100 more shirts, you know?
For sure. For sure. Yeah, dude. It's an interesting thing, man. And I'm sure you've seen all these brands too that basically were born out of a personal brand or something. All these influencers that like just create a big audience and then they can do these drops that sell immediately, right? And it's all sort of based on that personal brand and stuff like that. Um, but that's funny too. Like if you did sell out in 24 hours, like you see that happen sometimes. It's like, man, if we doubled it, we probably could have sold a lot more of this stuff. Who knows? You might get stuck with some inventory.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like Jocko Willink has like 3 or 4 different products now. Um, and they're all related to his, just like his personal brand in one way or another. Um, but dude, he's got like an energy drink that's in gas stations now. And I think it really just started from him like doing podcast circuits, building his own following. And then
Yeah.
he just linked up with a producer of some of these goods and they put his branding on it.
Yeah. It's incredible, bro. Like it's an amazing sort of creator economy business model, dude. Um, and I'm all for it too. Like I think it's really cool that people support, you know, some guy that they like versus, like Coca-Cola or something like that, or like one of these Red Bull companies. You could support, a smaller creator, a smaller business, something like that, something that's a little more like native and like grassroots. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do too. I think in a lot of ways it's bringing us back to like a community level, making things more local,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And even like on the ad side, like running local ads, um, and people will buy something from, you know, their neighbor over a national brand. Uh,
Hmm.
the national brand, the order means more to their neighbor than it does to a national brand,
100%.
So always a good thing.
Yeah, and I'd love to see it fully make that shift too. Like, I'm not sure exactly how that happens. Of course, it's really tough. Like, especially, well, it's interesting because the internet makes it tough because you have access to things across the country and stuff like that. You have access to things across the world, but it's made it easier too, just because of, maybe platforms like YouTube or X or something like that, and this sort of decentralized media, right? Where, people like you and me can get out there and post content and have it be in the same pool as the big companies and stuff like that. Um, it's interesting, dude. I wonder if we could ever get to a place where that's sort of the primary way you buy things, is going down to the local place nearby, or I buy from you and you buy from me, instead of both of us buying from one of these huge corporations.
Yeah. Well, I think the best way that social media has, like, I guess, democratized that is through the storytelling component, where, like, McDonald's has strayed a ton from their original, like, story and brand. The brand has changed a ton over the last 60 years. But your local mom and pop burger joint, where they're running it for the second or third generation. The guy who's working the counter has worked there since he was 12, like that. We've been a staple of the community, like that story, and giving people the chance to tell that story. Customers would rather go support that business, I think, for the story alone, just to be, that experience is more fulfilling for them. Um,
Absolutely.
And so if you have something that you are passionate about and you have a story to tell, just getting out there and telling that story and showing people, like, hey, come shop with us, come buy with us. Here's why we do this. Put a face to the brand. It's not just a huge corporation for people to, walk into Walmart and buy everything they need.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, dude, the storytelling. And obviously that's a huge, huge part of marketing in the micro and in the macro. Even like these big companies just use it on a single landing page to tell a little bit of story of, at least, here's where you are now, here's where you're going to be, and here's how we're going to get you there, right? That's storytelling. Social media is storytelling. All of that marketing is storytelling. So that's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's been one of my favorite parts of supporting, like, kind of founders and stuff through this community as well, because switching gears from those big companies to, a guy who has a story of, hey, I've been working full time, I'm trying to build my own business, I'm working two jobs at once essentially right now, working on these small budgets and stuff like that. It's obviously super high risk, you're sacrificing a lot, sacrificing your time and stuff like that. I would way rather help that guy out than help out the next Fortune 500 company that could honestly take or leave a couple $1 million.
Yeah, it's true, man. And like, hats is another one. Like, I wear a hat almost every day. And I bought this hat from a guy on Twitter who was just like, hey, I'm basically funding this startup by selling these hats. And it was
That's
like,
sick.
I'd love to be a part of this, help fund this company that he's trying to build, and you get a hat out of it. Like, it's a win-win for everybody. But again, just getting out there, being, like, really authentic. I think that's the maybe the big differentiator is, like, people can tell when it's not authentic.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think the push for that has been amazing. That's 100% a change that needs to happen on social media, and showing the sort of, especially with like business stuff, because you see all of the sort of like guru-esque, you know, here's my $10 million a day social media marketing agency or something like that. It's like, for two guys who have done freelancing and done those agency things, like, that's not how it works, dude. Not even a little bit. Um, and getting out there and telling a real story about, hey, if you really want to, like, build a business or have your own income and stuff like that, it's a tough road. You know what I mean? And there's a lot that goes into it. And sort of telling that sort of real, raw story of the difficulties, of the challenges, is much better than these sort of get rich quick, videos that have just plagued social media for the longest time.
Yeah, I think most people don't share the lows; they only share the highs.
Exactly.
And when you're working for yourself and trying to build something, the highs are really high, but the lows are also really low. It's The movements are more extreme than being at like a 9 to 5, if you will. Where like
100%.
you have good days and bad days, but it's like this, whereas your good and bad can be like this if you're running something for yourself.
100%.
And if you don't share the lows, to me, that's like a big red flag of like, okay, this guy's here just to posture being successful. Whereas if you're telling the whole story, it's like, oh, wow, this guy's, he's actually being authentic here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the spirit of that authenticity and that storytelling, do you have any, maybe like a highest high or a lowest low of your journey so far?
Um, the highest high is probably just getting the first customer. So I was 2
100%.
days from shutting down the business. We run some ads, it wasn't working. And it was Memorial Day. So I was like, okay, that Friday, I was like, on Memorial Day, I'll close down the business. It was a Monday holiday. So I was like, that's what I'll do that day. And then one person signed up for a demo, and the next day someone else signed up for a demo. And I was like, holy shit, okay, this thing has some legs. So we won't shut it down. And that was probably the highest high. The lowest low was probably, I fell for a scam, where this guy was like, hey, I'm going to automate a bunch of your outreach. Here's how many DMs we're going to send. Like, you should be able to fill up your entire beta with this. And it was like $1,000. And I said, like, everything about it seemed legit. And I was like, this sounds great. Wired him the money. And then he like canceled and rescheduled our kickoff call like 3 times. And finally I realized like, oh, this was a scam.
That's insane.
So that was
Dude.
that was a pretty low one. Because one, it's like you're out the money, and two, you're kicking yourself. You're like, how was I stupid enough to fall for this? And it was like just cheap enough that I would have gone for it, but just expensive enough that I thought it might be legit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, again, it's something that you live and you learn from. But at the time, that was a pretty low point.
Yeah, that's insane, dude. And there's so much of that stuff. And even like things that aren't necessarily outright scams, but people who talk up, because I've gotten involved with this one thing that was like not a course, but this entire like training kind of program or whatever. And it was when I was first getting into it as well. And I'll share my lowest low as well because it kind of ties into it. But this whole thing was supposed to teach you kind of basically what I do with early stage founders, which is just building out the marketing funnel for like a brand new business. But they talked it up as like this, hand held through the entire thing. Like, we'll take a portion of it for you. There were like points that every month you could accrue points and trade those in to have them do stuff for you. So, they will build out like XYZ or whatever you like can't do on your, with your time and stuff like that. But I got into it, dude. It was just a school community. I was like, bro, you can't make it seem like something else. Like, if it's a community, say it's a community. And it was also like $1,500 or something. I was like, bro, I know I did not pay $1,500 for, just like a school community. Like, pretty insane. But, dude, I remember my lowest low with like entrepreneurship entirely was I had been let go from my job. They got acquired, let go of a bunch of people. I was doing conversion rate there. They were like, what's conversion rate? Just, gave me the axe like right away, a few other people. And at the time I had started kind of getting into like freelancing and stuff. Like, I was trying to maybe build an agency, but it had that sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, if you're comfortable at your job, like you don't like do as much, for your gig, your side hustle and stuff like that. Had no clients so far. I was just sketching out like the service I was going to offer. And when I got let go, I was like, I'm just going to go super hard, start doing this. Month after month went by, dude. I burned basically my entire savings just trying to like stay afloat, pay for my apartment and do this thing. And I was stuck between like, do I just go get another job or keep going or this, that, and the other? And the first month that I kind of ran out of money and I put rent on my credit card, I got a client for the whole year. And it basically,
Damn.
it was like having a job again, like with this client, but I could serve more clients and stuff like that. And it just sort of saved me from, because at that point I'm like, all right, I should probably just get a job. I can't like run up my credit card.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude. And that was sort of the lowest low and highest high, like, maybe like a week and a half away from each other. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, dude. Well, it's crazy how often they coincide of like just these rapid swings.
Yeah,
Because it's one thing like that, one email that comes back and it changes your entire trajectory, in a couple of seconds. And I think that is probably something that people get most shocked by when they leave a 9 to 5 and start their own business is like, again, just how much the tide can turn in an instant. And there's a mental like preparedness to that, that you have to have. I think it's interesting. Some of the other guys in the group that we're in are all like Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys.
mm-hmm.
But the discipline that I think that they get from that transfers over to an arena like this where you just have to stay steady through the ups and the downs.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, dude. Like, I'm glad you brought that up because the discipline, I think, like you see all these YouTube videos or people at conferences asking like, what's the secret? What's the difference between somebody who makes it and who doesn't? I think it's just discipline. I think it's like, can you sort of ride out the storm with no promise of it ever working out and just hold on to that faith and that's it, right? And get so excited about somebody like replying to your email, something like that, and use that to just push you through. But show up every single day. The motivation wears off really fast. Like when things start not working out for you, it really sucks. And it's an inevitable thing that's going to happen. And can you still show up every day? Can you knock out that list of things that you need to knock out? Can you stay aggressive in the long run? It all comes down to discipline.
Yeah. Well, and I think it sounds like we both kind of experienced that of like, okay, you're at the end of the road. Like, are we going to shut this thing down? And then all of a sudden things start to pick up. But there is no guarantee of when that will happen. I do think it's not a if or a when, or like if you stick with anything long enough, you can find a way to make it successful.
Absolutely.
But it might be 2 days or 2 years or, 2 decades is probably an extreme example, but
Yeah.
it can take a really long time. So
Absolutely. And I know that we're kind of at time here, but like I would throw in that, we were both sort of at the end of the line. It started to work, but that's not like dumb luck that this, I bumped into a guy in the street and he said, hey, take my money and do this thing for me. Right. That was just payoff from that 3 months of just obsessive, like aggressive work. You know what I mean? That just finally culminated in that client. And I'm sure it was the same for you. Like it was just the fact that you delayed the gratification, you did all that work up front, and then it finally hit eventually.
Yep, exactly. Had probably put 100 to 200 hours into the project at that point with nothing to show for it. And then one day, yeah, it all pays off.
Hell yeah, dude. That's awesome, man. Well, you've got me a little fired up here. It's Monday morning, and I think that this couldn't have come at a better time, dude. Ready to rock and roll this week.
I love it, man. Well, Avery, thank you so much for having me. I know we're at time, so again, just want to say thanks. It's great to be here, and I know we're going to talk real soon.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, thanks for coming, man, and kicking off this whole podcast. This is episode 1, so thanks for being here, man. You're the perfect guy to do the first episode with, I think.
I love it, dude. Well, I'm honored to take that spot and excited to see where the podcast goes.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Talk to you soon.
See ya.